Vadadari. Yashoda Nandana Vajjana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayavishapa Paramahamsa Prabhacharya Sutra Sutra His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasaya Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shamako Radha Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Yamuna Mai Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Kankaraj Shima Bhagavatam Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi. All glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, glories to Srila Prabhupada. Right. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Alright, so Narayana Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devam Saraswatam Vyasam Sojayamudhirayat Astaprashu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhakti Naishiki. So before saying the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayan, unto Narayana Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. By regular attendance to classes on the Bhagavatam, and by rendering service unto the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as a remarkable fact. All right, so for Bruce, we are right in the middle, or actually, no, not right in the middle, but we are coming kind of towards the end of the chapter 24, chanting the song sung by Lord Shiva, 62, and we have 79 texts. But in particular, the part that's what's known as Rudra Gita, or the part that Lord Shiva actually sings, starts from text 33. And so now we're on text 62. And so we got about another 10 texts of Lord Shiva's prayers. And then the rest, is a beautiful glorification. So actually, the rest of this chapter is pretty amazing for those of you that are coming to Bhagavatam class. Very good purports, good things for discussion. So definitely it's an awesome section of the Bhagavatam to be in. And it's anyways, just you get these purports for Prabhupada's giving just really beautiful philosophy in every single purport, and a lot for discussion. So Lalitha Priya did text 61 on Sunday, which was a very beautiful purport, and so today we're going to do text 62. Let's see here. So with this Sanskrit, I might need your help with this one, Ananta, but I'm going to give it a go. Good thing Christian. Yeah, good thing Christian sent you if I butcher it. All right. Kriya kalapa idameva yogina.
Kriyakalapa idam eva yoginah.
Shraddhanvita sadhu yajanti siddhaye.
Shraddhanvita sadhu yajanti siddhaye.
Bhutindriyanta karanopalakshitam.
Bhutendriyanta karanopalakshitam.
Vede cha tantre cha taeva kovira.
Vede cha tantre cha taeva kovinaha.
Kriya kalaper idam eva yogina.
Kriyakalapa idam eva yoginah.
Shraddhanvita sadhu yajanti siddhaye.
Shraddhanvita sadhu yajanti siddhaye.
Bhutindriyanta karanopalakshitam.
Bhutendriyanta karanopalakshitam.
Vede cha tantre cha taeva kovida.
Vede cha tantre cha taeva kovida.
Kriya kalaper idam eva yogina.
Kriyakalapa idam eva yoginah.
Shraddhanvita sadhu yajanti siddhaye.
Shraddhanvita sadhu yajanti siddhaye.
Bhutindriyanta karanopalakshitam.
Bhutendriyanta karanopalakshitam.
Vede cha tantre cha taeva kovida.
Vede cha tantre cha taeva kovida.
Alright, you guys try it.
Kriyakalapa idam eva yoginah.
Kriya kalaper idam eva yogina.
Shraddhanvita sadhu yajanti siddhaye.
Shraddhanvita sadhu yajanti siddhaye.
Bhutendriyanta karanopalakshitam.
Bhutendriyanta karanopalakshitam.
Vede cha tantre cha taeva kovinaha.
Vede cha tantre cha taeva kovinaha.
Kriyakalapa idam eva yoginah.
Kriyakalapa idam eva yoginah.
Shraddhanvita sadhu yajanti siddhaye.
Shraddhanvita sadhu yajanti siddhaye.
Bhutendriyanta karanopalakshitam.
Bhutendriyanta karanopalakshitam.
Vede cha tantre cha taeva kovinaha.
Vede cha tantre cha taeva kovinaha. Kriyakalapa idam eva yoginah. Shraddhanvita sadhu yajanti siddhaye. Bhutendriyanta karanopalakshitam. Vede cha tantre cha taeva kovinaha.
Kriyakalapa idam eva yoginah.
Kriyakalapa idam eva yoginah.
Shraddhanvita sadhu yajanti siddhaye.
Shraddhanvita sadhu yajanti siddhaye.
Bhutendriyanta karanopalakshitam.
Bhutendriyanta karanopalakshitam.
Vede cha tantre cha taeva kovinaha.
Vede cha tantre cha taeva kovinaha.
Beautiful. You know, I was thinking about how Prabhupada said that every word in the spiritual world is sung. And so, can you imagine when this was spoken to Shukadeva Goswami? I don't know how when this was spoken by Shukadeva Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit, how beautiful it must have sounded. Because, you know, he could properly pronounce all the Sanskrit, didn't have an issue. Us, we have to, you know, find the meter, do the word for word, do the English translation, but they just understood it, and it's so beautiful sounding. And the perverted reflection of this in the material world is musicals. I figured it out. You see on like Broadway, get a Broadway show, and like they'll have a drama, and they'll be like all of a sudden they'll just break out into song, or like movies. They have these like musical like movies, they'll just break out into songs. So, but it's nothing compared to like Bhagavatam. This is the original musical, transcendental musical. So, with that said, let's jump into this very word for word here. Sorry, I forgot that. Kriya, activities. Kalapai, by processes. Idam, this. Eva, certainly. Yogina, transcendentalists. Shara Anvita, with faith and conviction. Sadhu, properly. Yajanti, worship. Siddhaye, for perfection. Bhuta, the material energy. Indriya, senses. Antakarana, heart. Upalakshitam, symptomized by, yeah. Vede, in the Vedas. Cha, also. Tantre, in the corollaries. Did I say that? Did I say that in corollaries? Is that how you pronounce it? Okay. Of the Vedas. Cha, also. Te, your lordship. Eva, certainly. Kovida, those who are experts. All right, so translation by Srila Prabhupada here. My dear Lord, your universal form consists of all 5 elements: the senses, mind, intelligence, false ego, which is material, and the Paramatma, your expansion, who is the director of everything. Yogis, other than the devotees, namely the Karma Yogi and Jnana Yogi, worship you by their respective actions and their respective positions. It is stated both in the Vedas and in the Shastras that are corollaries of the Vedas, and indeed everywhere, that it is only you who are to be worshipped. That is the expert version of all the Vedas. Okay, so please read, my dear Lord, your universal form consists of all 5 elements: the senses, mind, intelligence, false ego, which is material, and the Paramatma, your partial expansion, who is the director of everything. Yogis other than the devotees, namely the Karma Yogi and Jnana Yogi, worship you by their respective actions and their respective positions. It is stated both in the Vedas and in the Shastras that are corollaries of the Vedas, and indeed everywhere, that it is only you who are to be worshipped. That is the expert version of all the Vedas. So, purport by Srila Prabhupada. In the previous verse, Lord Shiva wanted to see the form of the Lord, which the devotees are always interested in. There are other forms of the Lord manifest in the material world, including Lord Brahma and other demigods, and those who are worshipped by materialistic persons. In the 2nd canto, 3rd chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that those who desire material benefits are recommended to worship different types of demigods. And in conclusion, the Bhagavatam reads, this is a famous verse, Akama sarva kama va moksha karma udaradihi tivrena bhakti yogena yajita purusham param. The devotees, the jnanis, who are known as moksha kama, and the karmis, who are known as sarva kama, are all aspiring to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu. Even one who performs yagyas, as stated here, Kriya Kalapai, he should always remember that the demigods are but agents of the Supreme Lord. Actually, the worshipful Lord is Vishnu, Yageshvara. Thus, even when different demigods are worshipped in the Vedic and Tantric sacrifices, the actual goal of sacrifice is Lord Vishnu. Therefore, in Bhagavad Gita 9:23, it is said, Yepi anya devata bhakta yajante shraya vita tepi mam eva konteya yajat avidi purvakam. Whatever a man may sacrifice to other gods, O son of Kunti, is really meant for me alone, but is offered without true understanding. Thus, the worshippers of various demigods also worship the Supreme Lord, but they do so against the regulative principles. The purpose of the regulative principles is to satisfy Lord Vishnu. In the Vishnu Purana 389, the very same thing is confirmed. Varnashrama Charavata Purusena Parampumam Vishnu Aradhyate Panta Nanya Tatosha Karanam. Here it is clearly mentioned that the Karmi, Jnani, or Yogi, in fact, everyone worships Lord Vishnu if he is actually expert in knowledge of the Vedas and Tantras. The word Kovida is very significant, for it indicates the devotees of the Lord. Only the devotees know perfectly that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, is all-pervading. Within the material energy, he is represented by the 5 elements, as well as the mind, intelligence, and ego. He is also represented by another energy, the living entities. And all these manifestations in the spiritual and material world combined are but representations of the different energies of the Lord. The conclusion is that the Lord is one and that he is expanded in everything. This is understood by the Vedic version, Sarvam Kalav Idam Brahma. One who knows this concentrates all his energy in worshiping Lord Vishnu. All right, it's a beautiful purport here. I'm going to get it to the Shagana Jana Shaka, Chakshur Mitaminata, as my Shiva Veda Maha, and Vishubhadaya Krishna Sayapadesh, Namaste, Saraswati Devi, Gordabani Pichadini, Vijay, Pashita, Vijay, Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shri Sari Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So I cut the prayers a little short today because I have a little bit extra to talk about because there's so much in this purport that we can unpack. But Prabhupada, he uses this purport to explain this verse and to explain how Krishna ultimately is the source of everything and is the only one who's to be worshipped. So it reminds me of a lot of the verse in Bhagavad Gita, Savrashachaham Rini Sanivishto Mataspatir Jnanam Apohanam Cha, where Krishna is explaining how he is the source of all the Vedas and how all this emanates from him. And then Sarvashachaham, Sorry, now I'm thinking of another verse, which I was also going to quote. Hold on, it's slipping my mind right now. But Krishna is explaining that how he is the source of all material and spiritual worlds and everything emanates from him. And then Krishna also explains in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita that earth, water, fire, air, ether all constitute his separate material energies, which is alluded to here also in this purport. So the first point Prabhupada brings out is that Lord Shiva wanted to see the form of the Lord that the devotees are always interested in. So this form is the original form of Lord Krishna, the sweet 2-armed form of Shamasundar. We hear about in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita how Arjuna wanted to see the universal form of Krishna. And Krishna says, okay, I'll show you my universal form, but you have to have the eyes to see it. So therefore, I give you divine eyes. And first, Arjuna, he felt kind of an awe, and then he got very fearful. And he was like, okay, Krishna, enough. Let me see your original form. Because he could see ultimately, all the material manifestation. He could see past, present, and future. He could see all the Kauravas going into the mouth and being smashed by the teeth of this universal form. And then so finally, Krishna, he first shows his four-armed form, and then back to his sweet two-armed form, which Arjuna is attracted to and wants to see. So this is ultimately what all bhakti yogis are attracted to: Krishna's sweet two-armed form. And so also another interesting point that Prabhupada brings up here, and he brings this up many times, and you'll notice quite often in studying Prabhupada's books, how whenever you have a verse explaining how Krishna is the source of everything and is to be worshipped alone, when you have that mentioned, Prabhupada will also bring up, or quite often, I haven't counted, but I've noticed this quite frequently, how Krishna is the only one to be worshipped, how you don't have to go to any other demigod to worship Krishna, or to get not to get your material desires fulfilled. So he quotes this famous verse, Akama Sarvakama Va. And how saying whether you have all material desires or no material desires, or you want liberation, you should worship Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this point about how Krishna is the source of everything, and how ultimately all benedictions are coming from Krishna, and how Krishna is all attractive, and how he is the only one to be worshipped, is very beautifully illustrated in the Krishna book. And there's a particular pastime I wanted to read a little bit of. So I was going through this, and I thought, oh wow, this is a very beautiful story. And I don't hear this one talked about too much in classes. Mostly it's like the more famous ones like Gaurana Leela and things like that. But this one's a very sweet one about the liberation of the Vidyadhara when Nanda Maharaj and the other Brajvasis, they were going to Ambikavan to worship Lord Shiva and celebrate Shivaratri. You guys remember this? It was a beautiful pastime. And so there's a very, very nice points that Prabhupada makes in this chapter that also bring out the points that he's making here in this purport. So if that's okay with you guys, we'll read a little bit of it. You guys want to hear some Krishna Leela? You're up for some stories today? All right. So I'm going to skip some of it for the sake of time, but we'll get to some of the main points. So Prabhupada starts off here that once upon a time, the cowherd men, headed by Nanda Maharaj, they were going to Ambikavan to observe the Shivaratri ceremony. And Prabhupada says here, sometimes the Vaishnavas also observe this ceremony because they accept Lord Shiva as the foremost Vaishnava. But the function of Shivaratri is not observed very regularly by the bhaktas or devotees of Krishna. Under the circumstances, Srimad Bhagavatam states that Nanda Maharaj and the other cowherd men once upon a time desired. This means they were not regularly observing the Shivaratri function, but once upon a time they wanted to go to Ambikavan out of curiosity. Ambikavan is somewhere in the Gujarat province, and it is said to be situated on the river Saraswati. And then, so they all go to Ambikavan, and they camp out there. And Prabhupada explains this next purport that they very devotedly began to worship the deity of Lord Shiva there. And by this worship, they also gave in charity to the brahmanas. They fasted for a day. And Prabhupada mentions how sometimes when devotees do this, they'll shave their heads. And so after they did all this, gave in charity to the brahmanas, engaged in fasting, then they took a bath. And and they were supposed to stay there for at least 3 days, according to what Prabhupada mentions here. And so Prabhupada says, the cowherd men, headed by Nanda Maharaj, spent the night on the bank of the river Saraswati. They fasted all day and drank a little water at night. But while they were taking rest, a great serpent from the nearby forest appeared before them and hungrily began to swallow up Nanda Maharaj. So Nanda cried out helplessly. Who did he cry out to? Krishna. You notice they went to observe the Shivaratri, worship Lord Shiva. But yet when the residents of Vrindavan are in trouble, they call out to Krishna. So he cried out, my dear son Krishna, please come save me from this danger. The serpent is swallowing me. Then the Maharaj cried for help, and all the cowherd men got up and saw what was happening. They immediately took up burning logs and began to beat the snake to kill it. But in spite of being beaten with burning logs, the serpent was not about to give up swallowing Nanda Maharaj, because it wasn't an ordinary serpent. This is actually a demigod in his previous birth. So at that time, Krishna appeared on the scene and touched the serpent with his lotus feet. So they're beating with logs. Krishna goes, touches with his lotus feet. And the serpent shed its reptilian body and appeared as a very beautiful demigod named Vidyadhara. His bodily features were so beautiful that he appeared to be worshipable. There was a luster and an effulgence emanating from his body, and he was garlanded with a gold necklace. He offered obeisances to Lord Krishna and stood before him with great humility. Lord Krishna then asked the demigod, you appear to be a very nice demigod, and favored by the goddess of fortune. How is it that you perform such abominable activities that you got the body of a serpent? So notice here in this purport, Prabhupada is stating, that one doesn't have to go to the demigods for worshiping them. One can go directly to Krishna, whether they have all material desires or no material desires. And we can see by reading this pastime that sometimes the demigods, they get themselves into trouble. They get entangled in various activities. So Krishna is showing this point here that sometimes they can succumb to material nature. So the demigod then began to narrate his story, and Krishna ultimately, he knows everything, but he's getting this demigod to narrate the story for our benefits. He said, in my previous life, I was named Vidyadhara and was known all over the world for my beauty. Because I was a celebrated personality, I used to travel all over in my airplane. While traveling, I saw a great sage named Angira. He was very ugly, and because I was very proud of my beauty, I laughed at him. Due to this sinful act, I was condemned by the great sage to assume the form of a serpent. One should note here that before being favored by Krishna, a person is always under the modes of material nature, however elevated he may be materially. So whether you're a demigod or a human being or whatever, if you don't have the favor of Krishna, so that's a very important point, then you're subject to be influenced by the modes of material nature, and you're under them. So the Vidyadhara was a materially elevated demigod. He was very beautiful. He also held a great material position and was able to travel all over by airplane. Yet he was condemned to become a serpent in his next life. Any materially elevated person can be condemned to an abominable species of life if he is not careful. It is a misconception that after reaching the human body, one is never degraded. Vidyadhara himself stated that even though he was a demigod, he was condemned to become a serpent because he was touched by the lotus feet of Krishna. He immediately came to Krishna consciousness. He admitted, however, that in his previous life, he was actually sinful. A Krishna conscious person knows that he is always the servant of Krishna. He is most insignificant, and whatever good he does is by the grace of Krishna and the spiritual master. The demigod continued to speak to Shri Krishna. Because I was very proud of the exquisite beauty of my body, he said, I derided the ugly features of the great sage, Angira. He cursed me for my sin, and I became a snake. Now I consider that this curse by the sage was not at all a curse. It was a great benediction for me. Had he not cursed me, I would not have assumed the body of a serpent and would not have been kicked by your lotus feet, and thus freed from all material contamination. In material existence, four things are very valuable: to be born in a decent family, to be very rich, to be very learned, and to be very beautiful. These are considered to be material assets. Unfortunately, without Krishna consciousness, these material assets sometimes can be sources of sin and degradation. Despite Vidyadhara being a demigod and having a beautiful body, he was condemned to the body of a snake due to pride. Therefore, from this incident, we can learn that those who are too proud of their material assets or who are inimical towards others are degraded toward the body of snakes. A snake is considered to be the most cruel and envious living entity. So those who are human beings and are envious of others are considered to be even more vicious than snakes. A snake can be charmed and controlled by mantras and herbs, but a person who is envious cannot be controlled by anyone. So then the Vidyadhara, he continues his very beautiful prayers, and this is we're getting to this very important point here, stated by Srila Prabhupada. My dear Lord, the Vidyadhara continued, I am asking for your permission to return to my abode to the heavenly planets. This request indicates that persons who are attached to fruitive activities, desiring promotion to the comforts of higher planetary systems, cannot achieve their ultimate goal of life without the sanction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is also stated in the Bhagavad Gita that the less intelligent want to achieve material benefits and therefore worship various kinds of demigods, but they actually get the benedictions from the demigods through the permission of Lord Vishnu or Krishna. Demigods have no power to bestow material profit. Even one who is attached to material benedictions, he should worship Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and ask him. Krishna is completely able to give even material benedictions. There is a difference, however, between asking material benedictions from the demigods and asking them from Krishna. Dhruva Maharaj worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead for material benediction, but when he actually achieved the favor of the Supreme Lord and saw him, he was so satisfied that he refused to accept any material benediction. The intelligent person does not worship the demigods or ask favors from them. He directly becomes Krishna conscious. And if he has any desire for material benefit, he asks Krishna, not the demigods. So, now, this is the Vidyadhara continuing. Now, because I have been touched by your lotus feet, I am relieved of all kinds of material pains. You are the most powerful of all mystics. You are the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, and you are the master of all devotees. So, let me see. This story is kind of long, but that's basically the end of it. So the point is here that one can go to a demigod for material benefit and worship them to get their desires fulfilled. But the demigods don't always have one's best interest in mind. And we can see that even they themselves are influenced, become entangled by material nature. But however, if one goes to Krishna in all circumstances, even if they have some other desire, Krishna can handle this in the best way that ultimately helps one become Krishna conscious. So this is why Shukadeva Goswami, he says to Maharaj Parikshit in the third chapter of the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which Prabhupada talks about here. He's mentioning, if you want this benefit, you worship this demigod. If you want that benefit, you worship that demigod. And then he concludes with this, Akama Sarva Kama Bhavas, because ultimately he's trying to get to the main point. Krishna has one's best interest in mind. So the thing is, we all want to be happy, but we don't know what we want. And so Krishna knows exactly what the living entity wants. The living entity really wants him. They want to be in that satisfying, eternal, loving relationship with him, which is why in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the Madhya Lila, There are these prayers spoken by Lord Chaitanya. You can find some of these in the Bhagavatam. But Lord Chaitanya is quoting Bhagavatam here, and he says, one is immediately freed from the clutches of Maya if he seriously and sincerely says, my dear Lord, although I have forgotten you for so many long years in the material world, today I am surrendering unto you. I am your sincere and serious servant. Please engage me in your service. It is my vow that if one seriously surrenders unto me, saying, my dear Lord, from this day I am yours, and prays to me for courage, I shall immediately award courage to that person. He will always remain safe from that time on. Due to bad association, the living entity desires material happiness. Our desires for material happiness, they come from bad association. So due to bad association, the living entity desires material happiness, liberation, or merging into the impersonal aspect of the Lord, or he engages in mystic yoga for material power. If such a person actually becomes intelligent, he takes to Krishna conscious by engaging himself in the intense devotional service of the Lord. Whether one desires everything or nothing, or whether he desires to merge into the existence of the Lord, he is intelligent only if he worships Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by rendering transcendental loving service. If those who desire material enjoyment are merging into the existence of the Absolute Truth, engage in the Lord's transcendental loving service, they will immediately attain the shelter of Lord Krishna's lotus feet, although they did not ask for it. Lord Krishna is very merciful. Krishna says, if one engages in my transcendental loving service, but at the same time wants the opulence of material enjoyment, he is very, very foolish indeed. He is just like a person who gives up ambrosia to drink poison. Since I am very intelligent, why should I give this fool material prosperity? Instead, I should induce him to take the nectar of the shelter of my lotus feet and make him forgetful of illusory material enjoyment. So Krishna has everyone's best interest in mind, we see. The demigods, they are running something like a business deal. So one can approach them. But ultimately, whatever power they get to give material benedictions is sanctioned by Krishna. So one time, I went back when I was in the university and I had 1 year left, I went to my counselors, and I wanted to make sure that I was completing all my courses for graduation. I didn't want one of those nightmare situations where you have half a credit left or something when you're about to graduate. So I went to the building to see a guidance counselor, and because it's a big university, it was like a long line. You had to wait a while. So I'm in this line waiting and waiting and waiting. And it's one of those, take a number and stand in line type of ordeals. And so I take a number and I'm sitting there. And I'm starting to think, I'm probably going to be sitting here for a few hours. So why don't I just come back? And I stood up to walk away. And this lady comes up to me and she says, can I help you with something? And I said, I'm here to see a counselor to make sure, I'm taking all the right credits for graduation, and if not, I'll adjust my schedule. But because there's a very long line, I think that I'll just come back. And she said, well, actually, I'm the head of all the counselors here. I'm above all these people, and I can help you. Come with me. And she pulls me in the back room. And then she turns around after we get in the hallway, and she tells me, Srila Prabhupada caught my eye, and I was wearing a shirt with Prabhupada on it. And so it turns out this lady was a devotee. and actually she was like in charge of everyone in this department. I had no idea. And so I get back to her room, and even though, she's kind of like above, fixing people's schedules, she took the time to help me like fix all this. And she's the main boss of all these other counselors. So not only did she help me, but I got my Juggernauth deities out of it. Because she organized my schedule. And then the next week I went back to see her and I brought her some maha to thank her because she saved me a huge headache. And then she said, I have these pair of Juggernauth deities and I would like to give them to you. And she had them for a very long time, since like the early 80s. And so I was like, oh, cool deities. I was like, yeah, sure. Because I had been desiring some Juggernauth deities in my heart for a long time. So when she came to my house, not only did she bring the deities, but she brought a whole box of like books and stuff. So, when when I was working with her, because she was the head and she was sanctioned everything else, I ended up getting so much more than what I actually was bargaining for. So in the same way, like Krishna, when one approaches Krishna really knows what one is wanting. Like you see little children, they're just trying to enjoy. They're trying to have fun. They're trying to play. But sometimes in that play, the kid picks up a knife. You ever see this happen? Kids are running around the house, and sometimes they get in the kitchen. Next thing you know, the 2-year-old's got to put your knife in his hand. Like, no, give me that. And I've seen this, with my siblings. And then you take it away from them, and they cry. Like, what the. But you can't. If they have it, they're going to hurt themselves. They're not actually going to enjoy it. So the parent having higher intelligence, they know the kid's going to hurt himself. So Krishna, knowing what the living entity is really after, that's why he says in this CC verse, if one's really desiring this material happiness, he's saying that we should read it again. He's saying that instead he induces them to take the nectar of his lotus feet and makes them forget the material happiness. Because as one engages in Krishna consciousness, this Shravanam, this Kirtanam process, what happens is that the desires for material enjoyment, the desires to be in control of certain situations in this material world, they diminish. And then the attraction to Krishna starts to increase. Just like in the same way, when you have a cup and maybe it's got some mud in it, so you take water and you pour it into the cup. And if you pour enough water into it, eventually all the mud becomes clean. So Krishna starts to give himself more and more and more. And as Krishna gives himself through the living entity, sincere devotional service, then desires for material enjoyment, they go away. And even if they get fulfilled, the living entity doesn't become really entangled by them because they've gotten a higher taste. So it's a very smart situation. Because by approaching demigods, you can entangle yourself so much. Yes, one can get desires fulfilled very quickly. But you might find in the end that it was better if you didn't have that desire fulfilled. It's kind of like they say here, be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. But Krishna knows. He's mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, past, present, and future are all known by me. So Krishna, knowing past, present, and future, he can see all outcomes. If you're wanting this material desire or that material, he knows what's going to happen. So therefore, knowing that, he can adjust accordingly. He can arrange things in such a way that you will take shelter of his lotus feet. And he's so sweet. Prabhupada mentions in a purport to one of these texts. I didn't read the purport because we don't have time. But Prabhupada mentions that if one takes to Krishna consciousness and gets the association of a devotee and renders devotional service, then one immediately gets love of God. And so then I asked the question yesterday, because I do a Bhagavatam class on Mondays. And yesterday, when the senior devotee came, so we had question and answers with him. So I was talking about this immediately. What do you mean immediately? Devotees come and they do so much devotional service. How does one immediately get love of God? There are so many people that came in contact with Srila Prabhupada that did devotional service, or are they all pure bhaktas? And he told me, he said, Krishna gives pure devotional service, but one has to be ready to receive it. Thing is, one is wanting so many other things other than that pure devotional service. So Krishna can't force it. He's ready to give it, but one has to be ready to receive it. So I thought of it kind of like a basket with holes. You go to the river, you try to fill up the basket with water for bathing, but if it has holes, it's just going to all kind of go out. So in our lives, if we're doing Krishna consciousness, but also we're wanting other things other than Krishna Prem, this is why the advancement can be more slow, because Krishna is not going to force you to become a pure devotee, but he's willing to give this love of God. So we were having a very nice discussion about this point, because I was having some doubt. I was like, what does it mean by immediately? But no, it is true. Like a lot of times we want Krishna, but there's other things that we want to enjoy as well. And so, Krishna, he's not going to put a gun to your head. It reminds me of a time one of my friends said she went to Vrindavan, and she was at Govardhan Hill, and one of the rich bosses or whatever came up and asked her for I don't know, for like some money or whatever. And she jokingly said to this kid, okay, but in return, give me Krishna Prem, because you're rich boss. And the kid said, okay, tomorrow I will bring you Krishna Prem. So she came back the next day, and the boy had a little Maha peacock feather on the deed. He said, here is Krishna Prem. Yeah. So yes, like by this devotional service, by being in the Nam Krishna, you can get it. But one has their container open to receive it. You can't have the lid on the jar shut. Otherwise, it can't really go in. So to conclude here, Prabhupada is bringing back how Krishna is the only one to be worshipped. And then he mentions the universal form. And this universal form, it's so sought after by yogis. And Arjuna, as I mentioned previously, Arjuna in the 11th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, even he, wanted to be shown the universal form. But we see that the pure devotees, so they can automatically see the universal form. Just like in one time when Krishna was very small, after he killed Trinavarta, Mother Yashoda picked him up and she's rocking him to sleep. And Krishna yawns. And when Krishna yawns, she looks in Krishna's mouth, like babies yawn, and she sees all the planetary systems. And at one moment she becomes like, wow, this is amazing. Like all these planetary systems are in Krishna's mouth. And then, Krishna covers her back over. And then in the very next chapter, that is the famous pastime where the cowherd boys tell Mother Yashoda, Krishna's been eating dirt. Kirtaneshwar told this story, and Krishna goes, Krishna's been eating dirt. So then, ultimately Mother Yashoda asks, let me look into your mouth and see that you haven't been eating dirt. And then she looks into Krishna's eye, and then she sees the universal form again. And then she thinks, oh, wow, I've been thinking Krishna's my son, then the Maharaj is my husband, all this. And Krishna, she's getting this knowledge, but Krishna, he doesn't like it. So he really covers her back over with Yoga Maya. So the point is, this universal form that's mentioned here, the Gyanis, worship, whatever, the Brajvasis, because they are at the source, they're with Krishna, they're serving Krishna in this loving devotion. This universal form, it automatically pops up from time to time, but they don't really care about it. And Krishna, he doesn't want them to expose to it because it would cover over their sweet rasa. But for the materialists, it can be very terrifying. Just like when Krishna went to the kingdom of the Kauravas to try to stop the battle of Kurukshetra. And Duryodhana, he was very puffed up. And they decided to arrest Krishna. And when they decided to arrest Krishna, they were going to try to bind Krishna and arrest him. Krishna showed partial universal form. And when he showed partial universal form, they could see, all the demigods and everything coming from Krishna. And there were other great personalities there that could also see this. And Krishna was so kind and merciful that even he gave Dhritarashtra vision to see this universal form, partially manifested universal form. And then he withdrew it, but the Kauravas were so puffed up that Duryodhana said, "Oh, Krishna is doing some magic trick. This can't be the Supreme Personality of Godhead." So we see that if one doesn't really have faith in Krishna, have faith in the Shastras, have faith in the spiritual master, then you'll come up with an excuse for anything. Oh, this is just a magic trick. Oh, Krishna praying is not real. Oh, these ecstasies in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, they were just Lord Chaitanya manifesting epilepsy. That's what some people say. If you read online, the material explanation by very envious people are that, oh, this Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was a great saint in the 1500s. He had epilepsy.
Say that about so many Catholic saints as well.
So if one has no faith, if one is not ready to receive Krishna consciousness, you won't receive it. If one is closed, you'll come up with some material explanation for this and for that and for everything else. So one should hear very carefully Srimad Bhagavatam and take to Prabhupada's instructions very seriously. It's a good reminder for myself to actually have faith in this, to worship Krishna and to understand that he is the source of everything, and try to understand how Krishna is the source of everything in my everyday life. So with that, I'll conclude here. So we have a couple minutes left. Are there any questions or comments? Yes. Oh, sorry, Sonam. Sorry.
Just two comments. There's that story that the old lady was carrying a big bundle of sticks, and they fell down, and she was like, "Oh God, Krishna, help me!" Like all of us say that, Krishna, help. And so Krishna appears in front of her, and so he said, "What can I do for you?" And she said, "Can you help me put this bundle back on my head?" So that's like Vidyahara. He gets Krishna's darshan and he says, "Can I go to the heavenly planets?"
Yeah, he has to go back to the heavenly planet.
Totally useless. And one thing you brought up that was interesting, of course, I would pick that out because it's like mundane, but that I guess Prabhupada said that Vidyahara was so, or the inhabitants said that he was so beautiful that he was worshipable. Yeah. So, you think that these people that worship all these pop stars and all these celebrities, how stupid they are, but actually because of their beauty, they're worshipable. It's right out of the Bhagavatam. Yeah. So, they actually do have some potency due to past pious previous activities, which they're depleting in this lifetime. But it's, no wonder, because that's natural. Just like when Putana came in dressed as a beautiful lady, they all just assumed she's the goddess of fortune and no one checked her. So that beauty really has a mesmerizing effect, but it actually comes from, ultimately from Krishna. But
yeah, it's so true. And even just kind of like I guess this is a little more dark, but that one serial killer, Ted Bundy, they said nobody was suspicious of him because he was attractive. Of course, I wasn't around in the 70s, but I guess according to what they considered attractive in the 70s, that he was a very good-looking, polished guy, and that, you think if your daughter brought him home that, she would be very, and, so people didn't suspect him, just because of, his attractive features. So, yeah, it shows that, we're all kind of looking for beauty, but the source of that beauty is ultimately Krishna.
My husband actually looked like Ted Bundy, and
oh God,
we know how that turned out. So the deities that you got from the council, the head counselor lady, is it the same ones you have now?
The same exact ones, yeah.
Yeah, because I remember you saying you had to leave some behind, or someone stole some from you or something like that at one point, but I'm glad it's not.
I had accumulated a lot of sets when I was in Gainesville. I had like big Rathayatra sized Juggernauts, and I had the Shingadev, and I had Gormitai, and I had a whole huge altar. Yeah. And then when I came to Tucson, I couldn't take it with me because obviously you can't bring that on the plane, and so I had to kind of narrow it down and give some to other sincere souls. But I kept those juggernauts because they were my first.
Yeah. Oh, that's very sweet. And then also one more thing is is it possible that sometimes someone they might be totally a devotee of Krishna, but they worship the demigods anyway because they know Krishna might not give them what they want, like because it's not good for them, but they want it anyway,
Right.
Anyway, that's the way my mind thinks, but I don't do that. But that's, sometimes I think that, oh, maybe I should, worship this particular demigod because I want, this or something. But then I'm like, no, that's stupid. Like, what are you doing? Why are you thinking that?
Yeah. The mind can get that way because, we're like, I want happiness at any cost,
Yeah.
But like yesterday, I went to the bank and I was cashing a check. And, the person, what do you call it, the teller, they have the authority to give you money. They have this. But when she was, typing on her computer, she was taking a while. And she was like, wait, I have to get an override for this. So even she had to get even though she had the ability to give me Lakshmi, she still had to get, a permission from a higher up to hit some button on the computer so she could access the Lakshmi so she could officially give it to me.
Yeah.
So the Krishnas like that, the demigods, they have some power to give some benediction. But unless, they got that, sanction from Krishna, it's not.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you have to?
Well, it just shows, with a little bit of knowledge, they think Lord Chaitanya, and misinformation, but think that Lord Chaitanya is an epileptic. But, it says in the Bhagavatam, his limbs extended and then they retracted.
Right.
And that's, but yeah.
It's not epilepsy.
That's not epilepsy.
Right. No.
All right. Yeah, my nephew has my cousin has epilepsy, and he doesn't act in the way Lord Chaitanya. Right. Yeah. Yes, Chris will probably get the last one because we're bringing out breakfast and then anything else.
So here's another science and engineering analogy, or maybe an actual thing. I think sometimes when people want material power or skill, you could worship the knowledge of science, like as if it were a demigod, like the demigod of, electrical engineering or something. And then you get that power, you become skilled in that engineering technique or something, but you might not have a high consciousness about how you're applying it. And so you might use that skill for evil without even realizing it.
Yeah, good point. I mean, you get, and even there's stories in the Bhagavatam.
Yeah, exactly, like nuclear weapons or something.
Yeah.
There were 50 super genius scientists at Los Alamos inventing the atom bomb.
Right.
And they all regretted it after.
Oh yeah. I saw that movie Oppenheimer. It very wonderfully illustrated that. That's the other thing. Yeah, you get a benediction from a demigod, but they're not fulfilling that benediction in a way that's going to free you of your pride. So therefore you get yourself in trouble, just like this Vidyadhara. So all right, Gantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Jai.